Republicans are going to be painted that we are anti-Title X, and nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, I'm a fan of Title X. There are about 4,000 service sites, I think, in the country that Title X funds. Only about 500 of them are Planned Parenthood. The argument from the other side is that with this Title X funding after this rule, that many low-income Americans will no longer have access to the health resources available to them. That's just wrong, because there are only 500 Planned Parenthood sites, 4,000 Title X sites. These are federally qualified health centers, which I'm a big fan of. In fact, I think we should have expanded the federally qualified health centers before we allowed the Affordable Care Act to pass. We should have looked at where the rubber meets the road, where low-income Americans have access to health services on a wide spectrum at the federally qualified health centers across this country. We should have expanded the federally qualified health centers across this country, not expanding Planned Parenthood per se, but places that are meeting the needs of the poor folks in our country. But when the government confiscates the tax dollars from Americans, and I think the abortion issue in this country is probably about 50-50. That's just guessing off the cuff here. But so 50% of the country doesn't want their tax dollars to go to pay for abortion services. And government takes that money and then uses it to pay for abortions. In fact, Planned Parenthood gets about $50 to $60 million in Title X funds. Now, not 100% of that goes to abortion. In fact, I think it's very difficult to determine how much of that tax dollars go to abortion, because the money is commingled at Planned Parenthood. In some of that money pays for regular health services that Planned Parenthood provides, but some of it pays commingled, money they get from private donors, money they get from tax dollars, commingled, and used to pay for all the services that Planned Parenthood provides. And so it's very difficult. Does DHS have any concerns about the financial oversight of Title X Planned Parenthood sites and that commingling that I'm talking about?
That is the reason that a part of this rule is that there's going to be physical and financial separation in the case where there's co-location, because of to make sure that there is no commingling of funds, to make sure that there isn't fungibility that is used, and to make sure that there isn't a benefit based on economy of scale, which again would be against the Section 1008 of the statute.
Right. You agree with me that the federally qualified health centers, take Planned Parenthood out of it for just a second, but the other federally qualified health centers actually meet the needs of folks around the country?
There are a lot of federally qualified health centers that are part of our Title X network that we work with and that do provide great service.
Right. Many have been calling this final rule a gag rule. And a statement released in March by Planned Parenthood referred to the final rule as the Trump-Pence administration's unethical, illegal, and harmful Title X gag rule. This could not be further from the truth. It's not the banning of abortion or abortion referral in the private sector. It's only governing programs that the federal government funds with tax dollars, as I mentioned earlier. Planned Parenthood chooses to prioritize their abortion services over the rest of the services they provide. The final rule is very clear. If Title X sites want to continue receiving federal dollars, they simply must comply with the provisions of the final rule, which are consistent with the original statute. Go back to the original statute. It requires that none of the funds, quote, in Section 1008 of Title X says that none of the funds appropriated under this program shall be used in programs where abortion is a method of family planning. That's in the statute. That's not my words. That's in the statute. And so the rule is clear. It says that Title X sites want to continue receiving federal dollars. They simply must comply with the provisions of the final rule, which are consistent with the original statute. Wouldn't you agree with that? If not, they will have to seek their own private funding to continue the services, wouldn't they?
I'm not aware of what their financial situation is.
Right. Also, under the final rule, grantees are permitted, just no longer required, to provide non-directive pregnancy counseling, including non-directive counseling on abortion to their patients. Isn't that right, under the rule?
That is a stamp, yes.
And can you go into further detail on how this is different from the original 1988 policy?
In the 1988 regulation actually was more restrictive in that it prohibited any counseling about abortion, and it also prohibited referral for abortion. Again, the Supreme Court upheld that as consistent both from a statutory as well as a constitutional standpoint, that particular one stood that test. However, we believe, as we were looking at this rule, that we needed to make sure that health professionals were able to have conversations with their clients that they wanted to have.
Gentleman's time's expired.
Thank you very much. I yield back.